everybody. I am going to talk to you this week about our what do we even call it? Little handbook the Santa Clara County Department of Alcohol and Drug Services put out a few years ago. The Clinician's Guide to Writing Treatment Plans and Progress Notes. But I think we'll first start off by recognizing that, in fact, my stylist, George, did come by, as you can see. Thank you, God. And so we are not looking at the skunk look. Also found out something interesting about toilet paper, that actually there are different manufacturer and distribution sites. You may have seen this, or actually not just sites, but trains, right? So it turns out that we are actually using 40% more toilet paper because we are not using toilet paper at work, when we go out, right? Places of hospitals, restaurants. We're not using toilet paper the way we usually do. We're using it primarily at home. So we are using about 40% more. So that is one explanation of the shortage. The other is distribution lines. They're entirely different manufacturers for toilet paper for hospitals and restaurants and schools. Okay, one set of toilet paper, and it's a thinner toilet paper, right? It's more of a, well, you know, if you've ever been to a restaurant. Okay, then there's an entirely different set of manufacturers and distributors for toilet paper we use at home that's more fluffy. Okay, and so it's the fluffy ones, because toilet paper is not seasonal. Okay, they produced and planned for a certain amount of toilet paper production. But by the time they ramped up for more production, by then the virus will be over. So theoretically, we have enormous pallets of the crappier restaurant toilet paper not being used, sitting somewhere. And we're going to continue to have shortages of our fluffy Charmin toilet paper in our area. So there you go. That is the explanation. It is not totally about hoarding. I know I was relieved to hear that, because, to be honest, it made me really kind of frustrated at human beings that for some bizarre reason we would all hoard toilet paper. So there you go. Now, let's get to the topic. The Clinician's Guide to Writing Treatment Plans and Progress Notes. All right. So, and this was actually co-written by our wonderful practicum teacher, Pauline Casper, and who, if you are going to be beginning your practicum next semester in the fall, you will have the pleasure of working with. She's been with the quality improvement part of the county for many years. I first met her because she was getting her KDAC, and I got to be her supervisor a bazillion years ago when she worked in Mariposa and was a clinical supervisor. She was fabulous. Okay. All right, let's launch into this. I'm not going to read it to you because I believe you're capable of reading. So as usual, I will not be going point by point through this material. But the idea being that there's an interesting phrase used here, which is clinical interviewing is the single thread that binds an entire treatment episode together. It's true that what makes or breaks an entire treatment episode from start to finish is the relationship that develops between the clinician and the client. Okay, so the degree to which they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel like what they have to say matters, even when we disagree, okay, it's going to make all the difference in the world. And so, for instance, she says the intake interview typically begins when the treatment alliance begins. But, you know, in some agencies, the person who's taking the initial intake data may not be the counselor. It may be actually the intake worker. So whether it's you from the beginning or whether somebody who's going to pass them off to you, remember that, again, the first face that they're going to connect with is that screening, or actually not even screening, but intake worker when they first come in. So the idea being that you want them to have some potential belief in our capacity to serve them. Otherwise, you're going to begin from the gate to have this power struggle that they talk about, and we won't want to do that. Okay. So she uses the term conversation with a purpose. So again, we're not just chatting them up. We're having a general conversation with the theme being what's happening with you right now. How can I best help you with that? what kind of resources do you think you need? Now remember, we're thinking about this from a case management perspective, not necessarily the clinical perspective, okay? So the idea is what we're being encouraged to do is increase our interviewing skills. And I would suggest that you can continue to work on this while you're just going about your daily life, meaning you can keep practicing listening in stereo, meaning listening for the content of what people tell you, as well as how they feel about what they tell you. You can practice that with every single person in your world, particularly your family, since you're locked up with them anyway, okay? All right, they go on to talk about what makes a good clinician, things like empathy, genuineness, warmth, respect, tolerance. And so, and in general, they make the point that we really are responsible for the alliance, okay, from our half. I would disagree that we are 100%, though I certainly am going to use, the principle that they're talking about, which is I have the large bulk of the obligation to try to find a way to connect with my person, even if they're very difficult. So yes, the client may be difficult. It's not up to the client to connect with me. It is up to me to connect with them, okay? And so the issue is that we are making decisions that affect their lives. We are giving direction that affect their lives. So, pardon me, not coronavirus. Probably need some, I think I'll go with coffee right now. So if they're angry about coming in, we can still meet them with empathy and warmth and respect and reassurance and say, yeah, I get that this is not your idea. This is not how you wanted to be spending the next month or two of your life. And being able to still have empathy and connection with them, even though they are in a place where they can't respond in a positive or healthy manner. Okay. Now, is it possible do we have to put up with everything? Absolutely not. Obviously, I'm not talking about tolerating verbal abuse, physical abuse, harassment. Absolutely not. Sexist statements. No. Okay. The art of this is being able to have people be fluffy-tailed and at the same time, okay, stay connected, hang in there with them, not walk out, not match them, get as fluffy-tailed as they are, okay, but hang in there with them, okay? It means letting go of being right. You don't need to be right. You're getting a paycheck. They're not. Don't worry about it, okay? Don't worry about proving yourself or forcing them to do the interventions you want to do. You don't have to convince them of anything. Remember, from motivational interviewing perspective, at the end of the day, ultimately the person that convinces them is the client. And she says the trap counselors often fall into is taking an adversarial stand, right? Where we get into a power struggle, where, I'm the counselor, do what I tell you. If you don't do what I tell you, you're going to die of addiction, that kind of stuff, all right? So what page is this? I don't even know. This is page 8. Okay. Definitions of good counselor characteristics. I love this list. Things like, again, empathy. Remember, empathy is about I'm able to enter your world and see the world from your perspective. What's groovy about that is I don't have to have a shared life experience, meaning all I need to be able to do is see into you and understand you well enough to understand why the behavior you're doing makes sense, right? So it doesn't even matter if it's what I would do. Is the behavior they're doing making sense based on their history, who they are, their temperament, right? Of course they would act like that. It's not about right or wrong. It has to do with understanding why this person operates the way they operate. Genuineness, which means I'm myself, okay? I'm not acting a role. I genuinely have respect for their rights to choose, for their right as a person. People even have a right to use drugs and alcohol. They have a right to not receive treatment, okay? They have a right to not choose what we're offering. Warmth, genuine warmth for them. In other words, to try to like people. I think most of us who are good at this genuinely kind of like people, find them interesting. You would think that would be obvious, but I've certainly had clients come through, not clients, but students come through who clearly don't like people, find people kind of stupid, or they don't have a lot of respect for people. And I'm always curious about what makes them think this would be the job for them, okay? Because if you don't genuinely like people, this probably is not a good fit for you, okay? Concreteness means that you say what you mean and mean what you say, all right? Immediacy, meaning you talk about what's happening right now between you and me, okay? That's a skill. I'm able to say what's happening between us right now. Wait a second. What have I said? What am I saying that is causing you such distress? Help me understand what's happening right now. So staying in the here and now. Potency, which means our ability to carry ourselves as though we know what we're doing, right? People aren't going to take direction if they feel like you're even more effed up than they are, okay? So you need to be able to carry yourself like you know what you're doing. And the way you do that is know what you're doing, okay? Learn, study, take in information, have humility, practice a lot, right? Self-actualization, which is the ability to, good counselors are actually working to develop themselves. They don't feel like they're a finished product. Understanding, being tolerant, sympathetic, empathetic toward other people, really recognizing that other people are, for the most part, doing the best they can, even if it's not good enough, okay? Being transparent, meaning you don't have another agenda you're not announcing, okay? What you see is what you get. Here's my agenda. You know, I always say to clients, you know, I don't pretend that I'm objective about sobriety. I'm a fan. And if it's up to me, absolutely you would choose recovery because, you know, I love recovery. And I feel like you're most likely to get what it is your heart desires if you're able to put that kind of effort into your life, if you can see things clearly, if you can make good decisions. Okay, so I'm not unbiased. On the other hand, I also recognize everybody has their own path. Okay, and everybody has to do what they need to do in their own timing. So, you know, for what that's worth, guys, I don't pretend that I'm neutral about recovery. I'm not neutral. Otherwise, why would I do this for a living? Why would you do this? If we really could take it or leave it, then we really probably wouldn't do this. Am I tolerant? Yeah, the ability to basically recognize other people have different perspectives than I do. Again, I don't have to agree. Being patient, you have to be able to be very tolerant. You have to be patient and wait. It is hard to wait. It is hard to wait. It is hard to wait for people. Some people change like a snail. These little incremental changes, and it's agonizing sometimes. And sometimes you're dealing with people that are not particularly stimulating or interesting to talk to, and you're having to be patient, okay? Validating, being able to give people, you know, recognition when they need it. I mean, just catch people doing things well and point them out, no matter how small. Saying, "Good job, man. That was an insightful thought," or, "You know what? I hadn't thought of it that way," or, "Dude, I didn't know you knew how to do that. Where'd you learn to do that?" Okay, catch them doing stuff right. Flexible, being able to change because you have to. For example, you get hit with a coronavirus, and now you have to finish this class online. It's called flexibility. It's a pain in the ass. But it's a requirement because particularly in alcohol and drug treatment, we're hit with things constantly, changes in paperwork, changes in schedule, clients who have a seizure. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can disrupt our schedule and our plan, and we need to be able to roll with it. Being curious, actually genuinely curious about people. You know, how come they think like that? Where are they coming from? Being open-minded, doing your best to be open to new ideas. And I know that's hard. It's hard. This is not one of my strengths, meaning that once I have an idea about how something should go, it's challenging for me to sort of back it up and take other ideas. Clarification, make something, be willing to answer the same question 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 different ways. Paraphrasing, basically being able to hear what people are saying and then restate it to them using different words. Reflection, meaning reflecting back to them that, yeah, I understand. Okay, I get what you're saying, or putting pieces together, going, okay, I could see where this could lead to this. And then neutral, meaning you're just sort of able to hang. You don't have, in other words, you don't have an agenda other than being of service, right? I just want to be of service today. It's a good prayer at the beginning of every day. Avoid things like assumptions, meaning that just because they're a heroin addict and you're a heroin addict, you know, you're BFFs, right? You know what the deal is. That is absolutely not true. Just like there's all kinds of alcoholics, there's all kinds of drug addicts. Okay, so you can't, while there's overlap, you can never assume you know what the deal is, because you don't. Uh, Again, preconceived ideas, biases, things like that. So, in general, check in with your own feelings. Recognize that if you're bored or not connected with a client, they probably aren't connected either. And it's okay to stop and say, "Hey, what's happening right now?" Because I feel like we're not on the same page, right? So, being able to call it in the moment kindly. The other thing they point out is time management, which is unlike a conversation. Clinical interviews have a start and a finish. We have a time. Usually, if it's a intake or something, we're looking at 45 minutes. And so, if we had multiple one-on-ones, right? When I see clients, I have a 50-minute to an hour. I need to stop and start on time because the person waiting, they want their time, right? So the ability to watch the clock without watching the clock, if you know what I mean. So you position the clocks around the room. Okay, if there's a clock, you position it so that you can glance at it. Okay, that you don't have to turn and look like that. Okay, you just you don't have to look at your watch. I mean, you put it back behind their shoulder, someplace on the wall where you can glance and you could track. And when it gets to be about 5 or 10 minutes before closing, you say, "Hey, looks like we got about 5 or 10 minutes." Okay, so you're giving the client a head up, right? So that when it's time to close, say, "Okay, well, this last minute before we close, anything we need to say before, do we need to table that for next week?" Okay? So you're the timekeeper. You can't lose track of time. That is not always easy. Some people I lose track of time with because, I'm starting to track them and I have to really force myself to pay attention to the time. All right, you want to keep them on track. You don't want them wandering around. Our people are not always good storytellers. They tend to get lost. So you need to just be able to say to people, "Hey, let me get back and make sure I understand what you were saying," right? Keeping them back on track. Okay, first contact, the intake. The objective of the first contact is to build the alliance, and evidence shows that much of the success of the treatment episode is attributed to the initial alignment between the counselor and client. So this is where you're getting the time for the purpose for coming to treatment. Okay, FOT, right? The purpose for coming to treatment. What's the focus of treatment? Why are you here? FOT, focus of treatment, right? Well, in our case, it's to look at addiction, but that's not the client's focus. Potentially, the client's focus could be, "I need to get this bullshit over with so I can get rid of my probation." Okay, so let's find out. Or I need to make my wife feel better so she'll let me come home. So what is the focus of treatment? Okay, and so the idea is that it's collaborative. We're deciding this together. And so DADS, or actually now we call SUTS, S-U-T-S, Substance Use Treatment. Okay, but back when this was written, it was the Department of Alcohol and Drugs, so DADS. Okay, SUTS uses the ASAM model that we've been talking about, right? We use the 6 dimensions. We look at the goals, which is what is the focus of treatment. Back when this was written, they used something called the ORS subscales, trying to figure out with clients, what it is where they're at, where's their stage of change. So in our case, we can even use our readiness ruler. We could even say, in terms of looking at your meth use, what percentage do you think, 1 through 10, do you think you really even want to talk about that, right? We can begin to get a sense about that. When they say the client's theory of change, that simply means, what does the client believe they need in order for their life to get better? Okay, client's theory of change is, what do they think is going to make their life better? What's their belief about what they need to do next? It's really important to know what that is, okay, because you're going to be building your treatment plan around that. Okay, take a look at the severity ratings, and then again, if we're having an alliance issue, see if you can sniff out what that is. So there's 3 factors. What page is this? Page 13. That we need to have agreement on. Agreement on the tasks and goals of treatment, agreement on the methods that'll be used to achieve it, and the client's perception that the counselor understands, okay? That is the goal of where we're going here, okay? The idea is, don't be looking at your cell phone, okay? Don't be distracted. You give 100% of your attention to the person sitting in front of you, okay? Focus of treatment, it's their personal reason. Why are they there? What are they hoping will happen? On page 14, they give you a bunch of do's and don'ts, things like listen more than talk. Hey, that's really important. Have good eye contact, no rolling your eyes. Those of you who are eye rollers, okay, body language, looking at them. If you're a person who tends to sigh, don't do. Well, pay attention to that. Okay. If you don't know if you're one of those people, ask your family. I have a friend that's always going. Okay, that's not good. Now she does that anyway, and she doesn't even know she's doing it. Okay, if you're going to be a counselor, that's not helpful. Don't lecture people. They don't need to know what you think about stuff. They don't care, honestly. The minute you're lecturing, if you're every minute you're talking that the client's not talking, you're sucking up air in the room. Okay? They need to be doing the majority of the talking. Okay? Don't be sarcastic. You didn't care about that when you were using, right? You had money for drugs, did you? Okay, that's not helpful. Open-ended questions, not questions that they can answer with yes or no. Okay? Clarify, making sure that you understand what they're telling you. Making sure that you're paying attention to their nonverbal cues, right? Do they look confused or frustrated? What's going on? Okay, so this is the stuff you're supposed to be learning in Francie's class about, counseling skills, communication skills, and then once you have a treatment plan idea, you're starting to get a sense about what's the focus of treatment going to be. Hopefully you've also done that by creating this kind of alliance. Now, there's things that can happen. You can make mistakes. On page 16, she talks about repairing the relationship. Sometimes we missed up. God knows I've done it. I've forgotten that they have children, or I've forgotten they had a deceased parent, or I said something flippantly that I didn't mean to say, or sometimes you're gonna make mistakes, okay? And so you need to understand that the person who matters in terms of the therapeutic relationship is the client. How they feel about how it's going is what matters. So we have to work within this, again, treatment alliance that we are primarily responsible for, because it's our job to try to track them. Okay, we need to be able to track where they are and try to meet them. Okay, that's where that's where our flexibility comes in. But sometimes that means that there's been frustration, anger, misunderstandings, and so we're going to have to defensiveness. We're going to have to recognize that there may be some barriers for the client in terms of trusting what we're saying and assisting, allowing us to assist them. Okay, so one of the things clients will sometimes do, particularly if they've had a fair amount of correctional history, is they're good at what's the word I'm thinking of? Compliance. They're really good at it. Okay, but they're not really doing anything. So sometimes what you might need to do is apologize if it's you. Okay? And if you're not sure, talk to your clinical supervisor. Or, hey, how about asking the client? I noticed that we're having trouble connecting. Is there something I have done that has created some distance between us? Have I offended you in some way? Right? Have you felt disrespected in some way? Just ask them, they know. And sometimes all you have to do is apologize. Remember that a lot of our clients have not had authority figures apologize. That in and of itself is a healing intervention. Having somebody in authority say, I'm so sorry that I was wrong. Okay, that's enormous. In fact, I would encourage you every time you truly do screw up to find a way to apologize to them, because I think it makes all the difference in the world in terms of them feeling respected, and again, it's kind of a healing experience for them. Now, the primary counselor is going to be the face of the whole treatment system. So again, sometimes people over-identify us with the systems they've come from, and so they don't expect, their expectations are pretty low. They're used to being treated with disrespect or disregarded or treated like they don't matter. So the truth is, they sometimes don't think we're going to be able to do much for them, and they don't trust what we do say. And so while they seem to want help, they may also reject it because they're sort of preparing themselves for the inevitable, no follow through or inevitable disappointment. So they kind of, it's hard to feel like, why should I trust you? Other people I've tried to talk to and they blew me off or they didn't follow through. And so, sometimes what you can do again is say, I know this might be hard for you. My guess is you've had people not respond to you in the past. Give them a chance to talk about that without taking it personally. Okay? Then your book talks about crisis situations. This is page 18. These are things that are going to happen when people, again, the client perceives there to be a crisis. Now, remember, in ASAM, a crisis is identified as something that could create a relapse or prompt them to leave treatment. Okay? But what that is will be determined by the client. Okay? And so every time a client perceives a threat to them, they have very high energy. Our people are often, because of, remember, trauma, they have really acute fight or flight systems. So it is not hard for them to get into a fight or flight or dissociative place. Okay, they get triggered pretty easily. So, well, as part of us is going to be annoyed, like, seriously, that's a crisis? The truth is, in early recovery, you're volatile, emotionally volatile, okay? So you get triggered, whoop, off you go. So you can't invalidate it, okay? Telling a client to calm down or stop being so dramatic, if anything, that forces them to up their level of intensity because you're not hearing them, okay? So you need to speak slowly, calmly, okay? Sit down, ask them to sit down. Can you tell me what's going on? Remind them to breathe, okay? Treat whatever it is like it matters. That's what we want. Most people, we just want to matter, okay? Do not yell at them, even if they're yelling, okay? But do stop everything else you're doing and convey that this matters. You have my full attention. Whatever I was doing, not doing it. Tell me what's happening with you. Focus up, okay? And then when assessing the problem, remember you're working from their perspective. Why do they think this is a crisis? It's important to figure out how come they're so elevated, listening empathetically. They're very dysregulated, so in a crisis they can't hear you. You'll have to repeat yourself. They're not going to take in information well. Keep them focused on the present, Be where their feet are. Okay, what's happening right in this moment? Okay, right in this moment, we have what we need. Okay, all is well. Usually what's freaking them out is the future. Okay, probably what's happening is not right now. So the more you can sort of bring them into it, taking them seriously, but bring them into the immediate situation. Okay, right this minute, tell me what's happening for you so I can help you figure out what we're going to do, because I want to take this seriously. All right, bring them back in the here and now. Take a look for dangerousness, what's happening. Is there something going on that could be a threat to them or other people? Sometimes people just act out because they don't have any other emotional regulation skills. You can ask about suicidal or harm. Are you thinking about killing yourself if you feel like that's appropriate? They need to know they can tell you. Okay, that's why I'm usually fairly matter of fact about it, which is, well, have you thought about harming yourself? Okay, tell me about that. It's okay. You could just ask the question. Have you thought about hurting somebody else? Okay? You know, most of the hurting other people I've heard is over custody. It's not uncommon for people to wish that the other person that they're sharing custody with is dead. They'd like to kill them. I get it. Okay? So being able to say, I hear you. Now, sometimes, depending on their level of intensity, if they're calming down, I might even say, okay, killing them is one option. We'll put that aside for now. Let's take a look at the rest of our options, okay? Right? Normalize it, okay? Normalize it. We're not going to go out, leave residential, and kill somebody. So let's talk about what else we can do. All right? Document anything that's happening there when it's over. And if you're not sure what to do, seek consultation, okay? Get some help. Don't worry about getting some help, okay? Help the person think through it themselves. What do they need to do to solve the problem? Okay, if they can't come up with any solutions, you can begin to suggest, okay, well, we could do this, or maybe we could do that. They have to choose what they want to do next, and then the idea would be, okay, that sounds pretty reasonable, and link it with, okay, this way, if something like this comes up again, now you kind of have a pattern for what you can do. So you're kind of helping. Remember, their frontal lobe is not always fully online yet. They've been living in their midbrain. The disease is in the midbrain, the limbic system, reactivity, feelings, okay, not in their logic. Okay. The other thing you could do to help somebody get in their body pretty quickly is ask them to start naming objects in the room, because naming is a frontal lobe thing. Lamp, camera, right? Coffee. That's a frontal lobe, not an emotional thing. Helps them get back in their body. Then your book talks about individual sessions, which are calling, paying attention to the intimate awareness of what's happening. So they remind us of the motivational skills we've covered, like expressing empathy and developing discrepancy, avoiding arguing, support their self-efficacy or belief they can do this, and then rolling with resistance, meaning don't push back, roll with the resistance, okay? Like most people. The most difficult clients are the clients who don't want treatment, don't cooperate, and those start to look like power struggles or arguments, and it's very frustrating, okay? And it's because we've gotten caught up in trying to make them see our perspective instead of us seeing their perspective. All right, so they give us some ways to act appropriately, like reflection, shifting focus, and reframing. And it's important for individually to make sure that I'm still tracking how are we doing? How are me and the client doing? Okay? So making sure that, I'm checking in with them. How's this going for you? How's treatment going? How's our relationship going for you? Right? How are you feeling about it? Again, most of the time they've never been asked in their whole life, excuse me, about how they feel about a relationship, but it's a good skill for them to learn. The other thing is when they're about to do treatment transitions on page 26, you're going to be talking to them about how do they feel about moving from residential to outpatient or from outpatient to aftercare, making sure that, you don't wait till the day they're leaving. You start to talk about it a week from now, a few days from now, how you feeling? Unfortunately, what a lot of times people will do is find a way to relapse because they're frightened of treatment. And it's okay to say that. Say, hey, you start to have some of your feelings come back or your symptoms come back, let me know. Okay, that's not uncommon. That happens for people. Let's talk about it, okay? And then referrals. So we have to make sure we've got all of our referrals lined up before the transition. You don't want to be flailing around at the time of transition and discharge, because you're going to have to, hopefully you've gone through the discharge plan with the client before they have left. So we kind of have already had a chance to troubleshoot any potential difficulties, because you want to look, remember the change plan we did? You want to look at, okay, what could get in their way? What could be the problem? What are they going to do if they hit a tough spot? What are they going to do if they relapse or they get stuck? Part of that change plan, that's the same kind of thinking we want in our discharge plan. Okay? All right, so that is the first 28 pages. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that, and then I will rejoin you next week for the rest of the chapter. Okay.